So as Perry said, I'm Nicole Del Medico, an interdisciplinary, yeah. Thanks. Interdisciplinary artist, recent alumni and medal winner of OCAD Integrated Media Program. And so last year for my thesis project, I created a virtual reality experience called Never Forget, an Architecture of Memory. And essentially, it's an experience that serves as a digital form of a requiem or a sonic memorial that reskins the player as an archaeologist of memories that belong to a 93-year-old Dutch woman, Anna van Vliet. And her memories and lived experience in the period prior to and including World War II in the Netherlands are exhumed via the navigation and exploration of the created three-dimensional memory spaces, which are contained within various rooms, spaces, environments, and objects of that particular period of time. So I'm just going to show you a brief little excerpt from a machinima video of the piece that I created.
My name is Anna van Vliet. There were two girls in my class who didn't speak Dutch very well. They had to learn it. They spoke German. I couldn't understand why. So we got a lot of people crossing the border who were Jewish. And there were a lot of Dutch people who picked them up and gave them a room and board. We heard that Germany had invaded Europe. My father said to me, let's put on the radio and hear what they have to say. And there was a very loud German voice, like Hitler's voice, who was telling the world that Germany was going to conquer the world and they would have a 1,000-year Reich, and everybody was going to kneel for Hitler. You better believe it.
So I'll just mute that for right now. So with Never Forget, I'm trying to situate the player in this prosthesis memory that reskins them as a witness to Anna's memories, which are now transformed into digital memory artifacts to convey the strong political and social undertones of the time, as well as to highlight the persecutory events of the Jewish people and of course many others during World War II. The narrative is mostly linear, however there are non-linear paths that lead to different narrative spaces. And the reason why I did that is because we all recall memories in different orders. And I wanted each player to have a different experience as they can visit them in whatever order they please, as well as spend as much or as little time as they want in that space. And just as Anna was a witness to events that transpired during the war, I too, through creating the piece, became a witness to her life and in turn also allowed the players of the experience to become a witness to her life. Never Forget, the way I consider this piece is history and memory turned into a virtual environment that instigates players who experience to hopefully search for a memorial in their own minds. Major influences for the piece were new wave documentary cinema, such as French director Alain René's Night and Fog, Hiroshima Mon Amour, as well as many serious art games. One in particular that was a huge influence was Mary Flanagan's Domestic, all of which influenced the aesthetic hybridization of the 3D environments that I created, as well as the documentary footage and soundscapes that I used and created. And there was a lot of theory, obviously, at OCAD. Theory is a huge part of our artistic practice. So I read a lot of texts and incorporated it into my work that were related to embodiment, phenomenology, critical play theory, affect theory, as well as notions of absence and presence, as well as immersion, in order to, hopefully, I'd like to think it did achieve a contemplative, self-reflective experience for the player, where they potentially could question their own morals. Like, would they be willing to do the same things that Anna did in her situation, or would they have the agency to do so, or be a witness to the events that transpired? So as I was saying, there were like numerous texts that influenced me, and one in particular was Ordinary Affects by Kathleen Stewart. It's a very quick read, but a very great read if you're interested in affect theory at all. But essentially, what this got me to think about was the ordinary aspects of my life. However, my life I found was very boring, which is then when I started to think about interesting people that I've met throughout my life. And any professors of OCAD or frequent visitors of Village by the Grange has probably seen the woman that I interviewed, Anna Van Vliet, often, as she lives in the Grange, and she also she's always eating at Corinne's restaurant there. And so yes, reading this book had me think about personal encounters I had with her and what her lived experiences were like during the war. Which she had sheltered 2 Jewish boys during the war. She was part of the underground movement and delivered secret maps for the rebels.
Anna Van Vliet, that is my married name. My maiden name is Anna Schotanus. My mother was a housevrouw. If you were married at that time and your mother had to work, meant poverty in that household, and you would, if you had to do it, you would hide it, or else it was a no-no. Mothers did not work outside the house. That meant poverty in the household, and that was the last thing you want to talk about, being poor.
When I approached her and interviewed her, and I started to gather various video files and start to unpack the project, I was trying to think to myself, how do I actually go about building something in VR like this? And there's a lot more information on it now if any of you are interested in producing VR projects. However, I can definitely say that VR is definitely a medium that can be explored through the lenses of different artistic practices. And for myself personally, I did draw from performance art, video games, installation work, films, and more. So for myself personally, the strategy was obviously first and foremost to interview Anna and then try to determine what I could actually translate into VR. And some of you might be wondering, like, how does one go about doing this? And for myself, coming from integrated media, I write scripts all the time. I do storyboarding, sketches, floor plans. Like, it was very difficult to figure out what would work, and in the end, I can tell you I did all of the above. So essentially, I mean, the simplest, anyone can do this, is like sketching out your ideas and brainstorming things. But what I found is it wasn't concrete and adjustable enough. It was great for brainstorming, but then I moved on to script writing, which I thought would be a tried and true form of expressing something visually. And I could tell things were starting to get a little bit muddy and or difficult when I was like breaking up my script into different components, because I had to think about the programming and the audio and how everything relates to one another. So I started to feel like I really need a mind map of some sort. And that's when Twine came to my rescue. And for those that don't know about Twine, it's an open source tool used to create nonlinear interactive stories. And essentially, many artists use it to create text-based adventure games. It just runs through your browser. But for myself, I used it more or less for a mind map. So I would listen to the interviews of Anna and write down any notes or key points about programming or audio within the nodes that I created in this two-dimensional space. And essentially, that laid the floor plan out for literally an architectural floor plan. And for the most part, pretty much everything on screen did make it into my thesis project by the end of the year. And so, yes, as I said, in the end, I did everything, including the crying part, because yeah, technology likes to work against you. I have this like ongoing joke now that I think technology is conspiring against me, but you work through it, you have a good cry, and it all works out in the end, hopefully. For myself, I decided to use the Unreal Engine 4 to create this piece, which was a challenge in and of itself, because I find not a lot of artists or game developers in Toronto are using the Unreal Engine. We predominantly use Unity in Toronto. So, I mean, it's free just like Unity. I absolutely loved working with this tool. For those that are interested as well, they have a very supportive, healthy community. Everyone's very willing to help one another and answer questions. And they also do have a very good developer grant program that I'm hoping I can apply to in the near future and get some funding. But essentially, the reason why I was drawn first and foremost to Unreal was just how it handles things visually. So I'm an electroacoustic artist as well, and my main tool of the trade is Max MSP. And if anyone is familiar with it, it's all node-based programming. And even though I can do some traditional programming, I really liked the fact that it worked in a very visual way, and it was very easy to see what connected properly and what did not. So it was very similar to working in Max MSP. But of course, if you're interested in doing strictly programming, Unreal offers C++ as well to use. The material editor was very familiar, very similar to 3ds Max or Maya, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, not that gorgeous out of the box, but this type of photorealistic quality is very doable within the engine. For myself, the biggest lifesaver I found working with the Unreal Engine was working with, they call them Geometries now, but they were previously known as BSP Volumes, which are, for myself personally, because I was teaching myself Maya and Mudbox and so many new tools, and of course the Unreal Engine as well. For me, this was essential in just rapidly prototyping a level design and having something very quick that I could test whether or not things were working properly, not only in an exploratory way, but in obviously a narrative sense as well. And then what was great is you could just simply export this level that you created into Maya and refine it further, and it was a huge time saver. But obviously, sometimes low tech is the best option. Yeah, so that's it. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them, and yeah.